What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Fight Within podcast. Today's guest is Tony D'Amato. He works for Meguiar's, and for 30 seconds, I could not say your title. How do you say the correct title?
The correct title, it's a nice long one, but it's a Director of Experiential Marketing.
Experiential
marketing.
So there you go, guys. All right. We also have, it's our first episode with co-host officially, Mr. Ben Briggs.
What's up?
So I'm stoked to do it today
Same
for the
here.
first time, man. I'm stoked to have you on board.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, like, why marketing? What got you into marketing? How'd you get there? And then tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Sure. Why marketing? I think it's almost a story of fate, how I ended up in marketing. More of a kind of fell into it, if you will, a little bit. I've been at Meguiar's 18 years. I always say that I know I look much too young to have been there for 18 years, but no, 18 years just this past month. So it's been a long ride of all kinds of different things. Working there, I actually started in the warehouse right out of high school. Even farther back, so Barry Meguiar, who was third generation Meguiar's, I grew up with him, so I knew him growing up in church. And so he had actually started feeding me Meguiar's products all through my life. So as a child, he'd send me products, he'd send me posters. I had the Meguiar's Lamborghini Countach on my wall growing up. And when I turned 16, he actually sent me to Pebble Beach for the Pebble Beach Concord d'Elegance, which is like the pinnacle of events for the year in the car hobby. And so he sent me there as this test week, and he basically paid me for the week to hang out in Pebble Beach. I got to drive around cool cars, and it was like I was hooked.
Yeah.
And that was at 16. At the time, I wanted to go work for him. HR wouldn't let him because I was too young. So I had to wait till I was 18, and then I started working at 18 part-time at Meguiar's actually in the warehouse packing boxes. And then the story kind of progresses from there and ended up where I am today. About 10 years ago, we actually got bought out by 3M, which is a huge Fortune 100 company. We have 92,000 employees, about $36 billion in revenue a year. So it went from a very small business, family-owned business that had been owned for about 112 years, family-owned, to being purchased by a 92,000 employee company.
Yeah.
So it's been a huge shift in kind of the way we do things and the processes and all that. But it's been a great ride. I love what I do. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, and I get to be around cool things and cars and people. So
Do you feel a sense of loyalty because you've been with the company for so long and you grew up with the family, and is there a sense of loyalty for you to stay with the same company because of that?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting question because I surprise a lot of people when you say you've been there for 18 years. Yeah, because it's not really the norm anymore.
No.
I think there's definitely was some loyalty in the beginning, and that's why I kind of wrote it out. And I was having a great time. I mean,
sure.
I was working part-time. I was traveling for events. I was doing school at the same time. I mean, I had a great life. And so I really enjoyed my job and kind of became really passionate about it. There's obviously a lot of investment after being there for 18 years. And so both in the company and personally, right? Mm-hmm. But I think at the end of the day, it's more about enjoying what you do. The cool thing about my job is community. And so, being part of the experiential team and running that part of the business, it's all about relationships. So that's all we do all day long is create relationships. We're one of the only facets within the company that actually gets to talk to our end consumer. So,
wow.
If you think about all the functions of a company, we have got R&D, and you've got marketing, like, traditional product marketing, and you've got, even some of our marketing pieces that are buying digital ads or,
Sure.
all these functions that make the product sell. But we actually get to talk to the end consumer who, at the end of the day is the one who's, using the product. They're passionate about the product, and that's one of the cool things as well. Our consumers really passionate about the hobby and about our products. So we don't have a lot of complaining or disgruntled employees. Or,
Yeah.
We're not like Ben, who serves coffee and has to worry about the latte being made wrong. Obviously, we have those instances as well, but for the most part, people are really passionate about our industry, so it creates a really fun environment. So
what kind of things do you guys experiment with? Because traditionally, if you look at people in your industry, NASCAR is a big hit.
Sure.
Car shows. Yep. A lot of those things are gone right now. And so your title comes at a very unique time. And so now with COVID happening, well, let's talk about it's a two-sided coin. What were you guys doing before COVID
Sure.
to experiment and spend your marketing dollars properly, and then what are you doing now during COVID?
So 2020 has been I don't even know how to explain 2020. Anybody that's listening, right?
Yeah,
anybody that's listening knows. We all have our own explanation for 2020 and how to explain it. We've all experienced very differently, but at the same time, I think similarly, because we all have learned to pivot. I mean, Ben's had to learn to pivot in his business. You've had to learn to pivot in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Everybody's pivoting, and so we've done the same thing. Experiential marketing, event marketing, going to trade shows and traditional car shows, enthusiast events. We've been doing that for 40 plus years at Meguiar's.
Wow.
So it's like a foundational piece of our marketing plan.
That's probably how you stay connected to customers too, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and so this year it's like, what do we do? Because the events they disappeared from one weekend to the next. March 13th, I was in Irvine. I had a truck in Dallas. We had a truck in Portland, Oregon, and it was a Friday afternoon, and we made the call that we need to pull them off the road. Wow. And I don't think any of us thought this would be. What are we in now? November, and really no end in sight. Kind of, unfortunately, so none of us really were ready for this pivot. But we made that call, and quite quickly we realized that we had to make some changes, because this wasn't going to be a month or 2 months or 3 months. I don't think any of us really know how long it's going to be at this point.
Yeah.
So, we definitely made some extreme pivots quite quickly. One of the things for us that benefited us was part of my role in experiential marketing is also influencer marketing. So we had already started to play in that digital space in the same type of building community, right? So we're the way we do experiential marketing is a little different than a lot of them. A lot of people that do experiential marketing, we do it all direct. We don't hire an agency to go out and find these influencers and create the relationships. We use some software in the back end of it, but most of it is building relationships. And so we've actually started building influencer relationships for the last 3 years. And so we just pivoted our dollars quite quickly and started to really focus on that, realizing that this year was going to have to focus in the digital space. And it's played off for us really well. We have done some digital 3D booths as well to replace some of the trade shows. But we've just shifted all of our dollars. Now for 21, as we look into 21, we're trying to figure out what's 21 going to be. What's the reality of it? It's kind of hard to plan today, because the days, it seems to change by the day now of what we can do.
Unknown.
And then of course we're national, so we're doing events from state to state and coast to coast. So one state may allow an event, the other state may not. So there's a lot of pivoting that's going to even have to happen next year as well.
You have to stay on top of all that.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing is I always say that I'm in the side of the event business I'm on is great, because I don't actually have to create the event. I just get to sponsor the event. We get to show up and support it. I personally don't know if I would actually ever go into the event business myself.
Yeah.
Because it's just so volatile. Even in a normal world, you've got weather, you've got, you're running against other events, you've got all these other things that are against you. So, we just get to piggyback on great events and promoters who do a great job at what they do. So
you talked about passion, and you're talking about how you've developed a passion for it. Where do you think that passion came from? Are you passionate about life? Did something happen in your childhood to kind of bring that out of you? You're a very fun-loving, very well-spoken, very respected man. But what were your experiences like growing up and the way you did? And we were talking off air, and at Ben's house when we met the other night about your upbringing, and how you got brought up. Do you feel that that's impacted how you are today. Obviously, it's impacted how you are as a man.
Sure.
But as an employee and as how you work and how you develop and how you think, could you pinpoint maybe something that happened in your childhood to kind of make you that way?
Ben and I have known each other. Gosh, how long, Ben?
I think I said
about
22 years
yeah.
earlier
Wow.
this afternoon.
Some may say too long.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think at the end of the day, for me, it's I've always looked at the way I grew up was unique. One of the things that was very unique were my parents' friends, older people in my life who invested in us. And I think even Barry Meguiar is a great example of that. Somebody who had invested in me from the very beginning, who saw the potential and continued to invest even as a child. I don't know if his intentions were for me to work at Meguiar's or not, but he saw that, that he wanted to invest into somebody. You mentioned the way my life started was unique.
Yeah.
I was actually adopted in Costa Rica. My sister and I were abandoned in a park. I was at the age of 4 when we were adopted. My sister was 2.5. And so we came from a very different background, right?
Still processing that. Hold on, time out. You were abandoned in a park.
Yep.
In Costa Rica.
In Costa Rica.
And
it's a trip. It's definitely a trip. I remember the first time I actually went back to Costa Rica. So, 4 years old, I came to the States. My parents adopted my sister and I at the same time. And so I had been in the States since I was 4, and my parents were always nervous for me to go back to Costa Rica. Just naturally, now that I'm a parent, I get it. Gosh, I don't know if I want that. What if they don't want to come back? Or my mom would even joke around, or I think maybe even in the back of her mind was scared that they wouldn't let me come back. You're Costa Rica, and all these things. But I had finally talked them into taking us, and I was I think I was 17. My sister was 15 years old. So the 4 of us all flew to Costa Rica for the first time. And I don't have a ton of memory. Really, I would say no memory of Costa Rica as a child from the age 1 to 4, 0 to 4. And I remember flying in to San Jose, to the capital of Costa Rica, that first time. And it was probably dusk because the city lights, you could see the lights on. And as we broke the clouds to come into the city, I just broke down. And it was the weirdest thing. Like, God, I don't have any memory of this place. Why am I breaking down?
Yeah.
I've always had this strange connection back to home. And I even say Costa Rica is home still.
Mm-hmm.
I've been back probably 25 times as an adult.
Oh, wow.
So I really love Costa Rica. And I've always kind of looked back at it saying, okay, I have to make sure that I invest not just in the Costa Rica, but in the situations that I was in, like situations that I was in. Because I know that the difference that it can make, and I have 3 kids of my own. My wife and I talk about, do we want to maybe adopt for the last one? My wife will kill me if we ever get pregnant again. So adoption is the only option there. But I think to kind of bring it, back to the original question, I think at the end of the day, my parents had, they were older parents when they adopted us. My dad was, I believe he was 40 when they got us. I mean. Yeah. So they had, their friends had older kids, and so, but all of their friends just took this really special attention to us and really just invested in us. And I think Ben and I, going back 22 years, his parents are a great example of that. I mean, they invested in all of his friends. I basically lived at Ben's house for a lot of my childhood because they loved us. And so I think that I don't know, it's a definitely something that I've learned, and I try to remind myself, especially with my own kids, but even in what I do at work and being a leader at the office and trying to lead a team. It's always been unique because as a leader, I've always had older people that have reported to me. So, I remember the first time I had direct reports, I had 2 people that were, 20, 25 years my senior that were reporting to me. But at the end of the day, we're all people, and we all, crave the same thing, which is just community. Yeah. So that, I think that, at least for me, has been one of the things that pivoted my life, was just people actually truly caring, being authentic about what they care about you, and just being consistent in that.
I said, before we touch or leave that, I wanted to ask, you talk about pivoting and community and building into people. As a leader, how do you right now and for 2021, how do you envision yourself like continuing to be able to like take care of your team and the people that work for you, and especially in such a hard climate of everything?
Well, it's a really unique environment too, because we're not getting the face-to-face time, right? So like our whole team went remote, and so we've all been meeting over Zoom and computers, and I haven't seen a lot of my team in 6 months, 9 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just so strange. I took a road trip, so I have most of my team is out of the state. So our offices are in Irvine, California, but I have people in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, in Pennsylvania. So a lot of them I would see on the road. We always talk about us being a dysfunctional family, my team, because we spend so much time together on trips. We're in hotels and we're at trade shows, and we just spend so much time together. We become like this dysfunctional family. So it's really strange not to see them on a really consistent basis. One of the things we've just done is make sure that we spend time consistently every week. So we've got two weekly meetings that we spend time together as a team. I have weekly meetings on one-on-one meetings with every individual on my team every week. You just have to make time to figure that out. And then the other thing that 3M's been really good about, in fact, we just got an email about it today, is just making sure that the work-life balance, especially in today's environment, is balanced. And so we have a goal is to reduce our meeting time by 30% in 21.
Oh wow!
Some more free time off.
Yeah, it's just there's just so many things that people are having to pivot now.
Yeah.
You've got kids at home doing school. You've got 2 people working full time from home. You've got all these things that are happening in people's lives. You just have to be really flexible. And I think that's one of the things that I've always tried to pride myself with, even before COVID. When somebody that's on my team, I always look at it as before they're an employee, they're a friend, they're a person, right? And they've got their own personal lives. And so we've had obviously family deaths and births and all these things that happen in life, and you got to roll with it. And at the end of the day, I always tell my team, like, family first. So if there's something comes up, you guys, that's a priority for me and for you. But yeah, it's weird right now. It's a weird environment.
It is, and I think there's a lot of people too in all industries. That's why I kind of wanted to touch on it. It's just like, it doesn't matter if you're an employee, a business owner, a student, whatever. Like in today's world, trying to figure out how we navigate and feel like a sense of belonging.
Yep.
And then as those, as a leader of those people, making sure they feel poured into. It's something that I think is hard, and a lot of people will be able to relate to, especially like when you're a bigger company, just feeling valued and building that community.
Well, and it's the COVID piece is one piece of it, and then just the environment we're in today, that we all know that we're in, is just it's just tearing down. And so there's not like you can't have, you're afraid to have conversations about certain things, or almost of anything, I mean, it's almost like everybody's afraid to talk about anything anymore. Yeah. And so to me, it's like, okay, let's break down those barriers and just be real with people and love them where they are, no matter if, and again, to me, it's not about, obviously, my faith comes into play. Sure. I have to balance that with work, and I try to do my best to do that. But I think at the end of the day, that's where, we got to love people. And that's, I think most people today are missing that.
But what do you do in a situation? Because like we were talking about, we're all Christian. But what do you do in a specific situation in big corporate America? Let's just say, I don't know, just a poop storm. You're getting in a fight with your wife. Your kids don't pick up after themselves. Yeah. And then you have to put on this professional face, right, and this professional.
That never happens, Manny. Come on, you got a perfect family.
What's it called? Facade. In front of your employees. Yeah. Because I think that's not only to credit you. That's how you are. This is only second time I've met you.
Sure.
But that to me is who you are, and who you embody is just loving on people.
Sure.
And I can see how you have those traits that everyone would want or need in a leader. And so I know that maybe comes natural to you.
Sure.
But what do you do? What do you rely on, or what do you do specifically when you do have that all the crap going on, but yet you're still being counted on
Sure.
to perform or counted
Yeah.
on to lead this team. How do you overcome that? How do you get past all the BS that's going on here?
Yep.
And then put on the leader hat.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you think about, I can think back to extreme situations in my life and to the normal mundane, the kids are screaming and you're trying to be on a conference call.
Yeah.
To all the way to like, I have to leave on a business trip and my wife and I just had a full on blowout and this, I can't leave, but I have to leave. Right.
Yeah.
And that whole balance of it at the end of the day, like, I think the first thing you have to do is just kind of step back from the situation. Honestly, and I'm just really candid with my team, even with my my supervisor. Like, hey, this is going on. I've been candid enough to say, hey, I can't leave on this trip. I need to stay home. There's stuff going on. I got to be at home. But at the same time, there's situations you just can't do that, right? There's there's a trade show that has to happen. There's something that's critical. And it always seems to happen when there's something really critical, right, as well. Yeah. It's kind of like Sunday mornings, back when we went to church.
Yeah.
But Sunday mornings, I can think of growing up, like Sunday mornings were never easy because, the devil doesn't want you at church. So there's a fight on the way there. The kids were fighting at home,
tire.
Right? I mean, it's just how it works. It's just, perfect storm. So. But I think you got to step back, and I always tell my team as well, like, just be honest with me, let me know what's going on. I'll work with you as much as I can. There's definitely been situations where I have an employee. I think most of my teams reported into me for probably I think the one team member who's reported to me the least amount of times, maybe 2 or 3 years, but most of them we've worked together for at least 10 years, and so we've had that relationship that like. I've had calls that say, hey, this is what's going on. I need, and we try to be as realistic with them as possible. And, at the same time, your faith does come into play. So you try to encourage them. You encourage yourself, right?
Yeah.
You just, sometimes you tell them something that you don't even know if you believe at that point because you might be going through the same or something similar. So, it's just life. I mean, it's the same thing. You're a dad. We're all dads. It's the same thing as our kids. I mean, hand up first one to say I don't handle the situation right every time with my kids, but then you walk away sometimes, you're like, gosh, why did I do that? Like, it's like you just got to step back and I think I don't know, I almost would, I wouldn't almost say, I think being a dad is harder than being a boss.
Man.
It's actually definitely it's kind of funny because it's one of the things. So I'm actually a stepdad of 2, so I married 2 kids and then we had a third. So when I came into this marriage, I thought it was going to be like, this is easy. Like, that's not a hard job. I mean, I've got 10 kids at work, it's just going to be hard. But I think one of the biggest struggles for me was realizing the separation of like, at work, you're an authority and you can just, you've got to do this and you've got to finish it and that's it. Where at home, you're the authority, but it's a much different cadence of,
the way you communicate.
And you got to do this, but it may not happen quite the way you expected it. So, that's a whole different ballgame. That's a whole different podcast.
Is there anything that you can look at because obviously now everyone, when you've been doing something for so long, it's hard to get motivated.
Yeah.
So what motivates you now as opposed to what motivated you in the beginning?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, so my journey with Meguiar's was a long one. I mean, obviously I've been here 18 years. Mm-hmm. I started out in the warehouse working part-time, shipping boxes. It was back in the day when we had magazines, so people would, order stuff by magazines. I remember this time of year we would be boxing up Christmas gifts and wrapping, we'd send them upstairs to get them wrapped. And I became really passionate about events and being on the road. I was 19, 20 years old and I had a chance to travel the country. So I got really excited. So it was easy to get motivated back then. And so I went into the event side, still part-time. I went to school at nights and finished my degree. And then I took a full-time role in the event department. Then 3M bought us out, and I ended up taking over the event side of the business for Meguiar's, and then eventually for all of 3M Auto Care. And then, started mixing other things in there. But then, as you get older, your life gets more complicated, right?
Sure.
So, I remember when I first started dating my wife, I was already managing the event business for Meguiar's. And I was really busy. I mean, I was probably traveling 2 to 3 weeks a month. And this other motivation in my life became really important, right? So I remember wanting to skip trips and not working not being as motivated to work because I had, I had this girl at home that I wanted to hang out with. So yeah, I think there's seasons of our life, just, even in our careers and just in life, that you become more motivated by one thing and then less maybe by the other. At the end of the day, I've always thought about work as being, obviously it's something you have to enjoy, but at the end of the day, it's a necessity as well. So there's those seasons where maybe the motivation isn't that great. It's not that exciting, but, especially as a dad now, you got to provide. And so, you just got to sometimes put your big boy pants on and go to work. And then what I've discovered is that the motivation comes eventually, right? If you have the discipline, the motivation will come. It may not be as quick as you wanted, and it may not be the way you thought it was going to come, but it does come. I would almost say that you have to reinvent yourself sometimes, because I talk a lot with some of my employees who maybe aren't motivated, or gosh, they really want to do something else. They want to move up in their career, but they don't know how to do it. And so sometimes you just got to be like, hey guys, you got to reinvent yourself. I can help you as much as I can. I can guide you. But at the end of the day, it's your destiny that you got to figure out. And so, I've definitely learned to do that. Is kind of, when I got into this role, it was just events. And we started looking at other opportunities. Gosh, experiential marketing makes sense. Influencer marketing actually makes a lot of sense for the event side. So I started to test things with influencer marketing, and that's kind of how we've evolved to what we are today, which has actually set us up really well for where we are in this season.
That probably had a huge role into where we're at now, because you already kind of dabbled in it before, so you weren't trying to start from scratch.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think you just got to continue to sometimes motivate yourself. Sometimes you just got to be okay in your own skin and say, gosh, maybe I'm not as motivated today as I should be. But you've got to be faithful. And I think, again, Barry actually used to always say this, is sometimes his best employees were not the Christians in the company, and that's not the testimony we want as Christians. And so even as faith believers, we have to remind ourselves, hey, this is a testimony. The way I go to work and the way that I perform and the way that I'm seen is a testimony of our faith, right? And so there's my wife is really wise when it comes to reminding me of. She's like, let's go to the Bible. Let's just look at what the Bible says in anything, right? Not just in work or whatever, just anything in life. And I think that for us is another reminder of gosh, this is a testimony of who I am. I don't want my employees who know who I am as a believer to think that I'm slacking at work because I want to be lazy or I'm trying to get away with stuff that there should be enough motivation for us, but obviously. Do you do
anything specific, or do you have a specific verse that you turn to say, hey, look, this is how I'm going to get motivated? Or do you have goals that you write down, or numbers you have to hit? What is it for you that kind of triggers that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of things. Obviously, I have my life verses that I love. I mean, Jeremiah 29:11 is always one that I've kind of stood upon. In the beginning of what I, kind of where I started to where I am today, or even, just, being left in a park to having the opportunity to live in the States, to being raised by a Christian home, loving parents, never wanting for anything. Jeremiah 29:11 is just that's real. He knows the plans he has for you, right? Yeah. And they're good ones. And I think that for sure is one that I've always tried to go back to and remind myself of. And then, at work, there's plenty of measurements that I can, try to motivate myself with. And again, and for me, I just love relationship. And so, that's my motivator at work is how do I make, more connections for the business that are positive for the business. How do I make more connections for people that help each other? Like, and just real ones, like, actually spend time with people and sit down and have a cocktail with them or have a cup of coffee or, just actually spend time with people. It's funny because I think some people, my wife and I stay very busy. In fact, Ben makes fun of me for this sometimes.
Way too busy.
But we both love it. We just love spending time with people. And so that's just what our calendar looks like because of it.
Do you ever find it easy to maybe, or how have you avoided? I don't know if you've actually avoided it, but I'm hoping that you have. But how have you avoided using your past circumstances as an excuse to feel sorry for yourself? Yeah,
like a crutch to get ahead.
Yeah,
it's like, oh well, I was abandoned, like how have you dealt with that? Because I feel like, as an adult, you almost want to like assess that more. Like, well, why did my parents do that? Why did I have this life? Or at least I did growing up. Growing up, You're just living life. You're just growing up.
Yeah.
And then you become an adult and you're looking back at these things or kind of taking inventory of your life. And you're like, oh man, that was crappy. Like, why did that happen to me?
Yeah.
How have you dealt with that as an adult?
Yeah. I think it's a good question. For me, I've been fortunate enough to, I don't know why, I never really felt that. And I think it's a lot of it's because of just the great childhood I had. I think what I look back to more, it's more of like, why did I do that? Right? We've all been stupid in our lives. We all had those moments, right?
I still am.
I'm still learning that one.
And I think those are the moments I go back to sometimes and like, man, why didn't I make a better choice then? Or why didn't I use that opportunity for better than selfish reasons? I have to explain this to my kids one day, or I had to explain it to my wife when we, got married, all those things that you're like, man, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Obviously they're learning experiences and you go back and it's okay because we learned from them and we didn't continue with them. But those are the moments I think I struggle with more than why. Mm-hmm. Now I do know other people that have had similar experiences that I have had, who often go back and be like, man, why did they leave me in a park? Or why do they care about me? Or whatever the circumstances were, or they may think they are.
Yeah.
But one of the things, I've talked to a lot of kids that have been in my situation or parents that have adopted kids. And, one of the things I think and again, I think everybody reacts to that differently. My parents were very upfront with me about being adopted. And so it was never something that was hidden. I can never remember the day that I was sat down and like, oh son, you were adopted. It was always something I knew, and it was just kind of part of my identity.
Yeah.
But it was never, at the same time, my identity was I am part of this family, and these are my parents. Yeah. And so I think that difference, not to say that every person who was adopted who struggles with their past wasn't treated the same way or felt as much love.
Yeah.
But I think just the way my parents approached it may have been different, and I think benefited the way that I viewed it in my head.
Definitely.
Yeah.
For sure. But so you kind of have for, not to sound cliche and cheesy, but you kind of have the American dream life, right? So not advice, but just kind of recap, you were, born in a third world country, abandoned, brought to the United States. Granted, you were brought into an amazing family, but, you had to hustle and earn everything you have.
Yep.
You worked your way up from essentially the bottom of a company to the top of where you're at. It's quote unquote the American dream. It's what everyone wants, right? You have the story. So if you were to kind of talk to maybe kids that are in that same situation, or even adults that still can control kind of their own destiny, what would you say to them? I mean, not to get a cheesy one-liner, but obviously nothing was given to you.
Sure.
Right? You had to still earn it. You got brought into an awesome family, but they didn't give you anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you still had to earn things. You had to get to where you're at. And now that you're there, what would you say to maybe your younger self?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple things I think the way that I would approach it, and the first one is just being realistic with life. Like the expectation of life is off. I think especially as we're younger, if we have these fantasies of what life's going to be. I can remember. In fact, I told my wife this the other day. She was laughing. I told her, I said, I remember. And of course, I guess it's fortune and fame. I guess what you're thinking of. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I was in high school, and I remember telling my mom that I was going to have a 7 Series BMW by the time I was 25. Why and where I came up from that, I don't know.
Orange County, baby.
Right? Yeah. But that was like this idea that I had in my head. Like all, these, and I mean, if you think about it now, it's just silly. But just being realistic with your expectations of what your future is going to look like. Because at the end of the day, like you said, nothing is given to, for most of us, nothing's just given to us.
Yeah.
There's the few and far between that have it or that make the big break. I think even especially today, if you think about, I guess every generation has something like this, but this influencer idea of these young, my kids, they would love to be an influencer. I have a 12-year-old who she thinks that'd be great. And I'm like, okay, let's take a step back and really think about this. Let me, how many Kobes are there, right? It's not quite maybe that far-fetched, but it still is pretty far-fetched to think that you're going to become an influencer and make all this money and it's just lights and glitz and glamour. But at the same time, you have to balance that with like motivation and wanting to, work towards and strive towards something. Mm-hmm. So like, I think the balance of it is obviously a big piece of just being realistic with what you have.
Well, I don't think people know that story though. A lot of people don't know the behind the scenes. Like, was Kobe a success? Yeah. But he also shot thousands and thousands of shots every day.
Right.
Yeah.
He woke up at 3-4 in the morning and went to the gym when no one was there. Like, people don't know that side of it. They see when the cameras are on. And Ben and I have talked about it before. Like when you're fighting, people just see you the night of the fight, under the lights, in the cage. They don't see the running, the strength and conditioning, the dieting, the effects it takes on your family. They don't get to see any of that. Nor should they. Yeah. They're paying for that, and that's how you get paid, which is great. But how do you balance that out?
Yeah.
How do you balance it out? Because there's a part, like I'm a big dreamer. A part of you should have that. Like in high school, I thought I was going to go to the NFL.
Yep.
In my head, I played at a little school that probably had, I think, 2 guys ever come out and get a D1 scholarship. And there was actually one of those guys ended up playing in the NFL. But in my head, I was like, I'm going to league.
Yeah.
Like, I work harder than everyone. I'm here late. Yep. I know the plays. I do everything right. My circumstances were different. Yeah. But then a follow-up question to what Ben asked is how do you, with your own kids, how do you balance that out? Because, or what kind of advice would you give your own kids and then people coming up in the workforce? Because now with influencer marketing, with social media, there are people making money. Yep. Like you couldn't say 10 years ago even, I could have told my kid, don't play video games, you'll never make money doing that.
Yeah.
Now there's
there's
kids making millions of dollars playing video games.
Game. No offense,
it's insane.
but
right, yeah.
But how do you balance that out? Because there's people don't want to work anymore. People don't want to show up and have this schedule and be responsible. So what type of advice would you give them? And 2, do you work with younger people in your department?
Yeah, I mean, the reality of today is a lot different than what we grew up with, right? So that idea of discipline, the idea of working hard to getting up at 3 a.m. and shooting, I mean, it's just not there anymore. Yeah. Or maybe not to the extent. There's still some of those guys out there, but to the extent of it. I think that's the answer is it's twofold, or it's answered 2 ways depending on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to my kids or somebody that I can be really straight with, the answers can be a bit different because I think at the end of the day, you have to put faith first. And so if you're faithful to him, he'll be faithful back to you. And I think a lot of us, I mean, I know myself growing up, I was raised in the church. I did everything right. I went to Sunday school. I knew all the verses, but I had that period of I wouldn't say that I fell out of my faith, but that I was just being stupid. Yeah. And those are the experiences that I talked about earlier. I go, look back and why did I do that? Like, why? Those are the things that you look back on. So if you can be, really faithful in those times through that hard, and that's, to me, that's like my number one goal as a father. Like, let's get our kids through those tough times, those years that are really hard. Because if you can learn to be faithful to him during that time, it's going to be much easier to learn to be faithful to him as a father, as a husband at those times, because life doesn't get much easier. It doesn't get easier. It just gets harder.
Yeah.
But as we grow that discipline of really trusting in him, really, truly being faithful and truly being, disciplined in that, we all three of us could probably sit here for hours talking about those times that were like, gosh, I wanted to, but I didn't trust them.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't, but then I think in the workforce and just in the social world or the kind of a broader sense, I think it does go back to discipline and just really, being disciplined in what you do and making sure that, you got to care about what you do. You got not just, it doesn't have to just be fun. You actually have to truly care about it, authentically. And people see that. I think, obviously, like for your example, you worked your tail off and you thought you were going to get in the NFL because you worked your tail off and you were authentic in what you did, right? And I'm sure those experiences you could go back and say, well, it may not have gotten to me where I thought I was going to go, but it still brought me to my story today in a positive way. And I think that maybe that's where I'm trying to land the being realistic in our expectations, is understanding, okay, maybe it didn't get me to the NFL, but it got me to where I am today. I've learned from what I've done, the discipline that I've had, and there's a story even in that. Which I think a lot of us just have a hard time, and it goes back to that whole, well, why did this happen to me, or why didn't this happen to me? And really just being like, stepping back and being like, okay, God, I realize that maybe my expectations were wrong. This wasn't the plan you had for me, but you did still have a plan. And I'm here today because of it, and this is why or what has happened to me, So,
and I think it's also just learning and living through your individual story, right? Like,
100%.
if you would have just stopped and turtled up and been like, "Oh man, I didn't make the NFL.
Yep.
I'm done." Then like,
my life doesn't matter.
And I feel like, I feel like in today's world, it's become okay to just give up and quit on things.
Yeah.
Versus like when we grew up and our parents grew up, it's like, you don't quit. You keep going.
Yeah.
You don't stop. You change. You adapt. You rotate. You move. You don't stop. You just keep going.
Yep.
And I feel like the second we stop doing that and we stop learning and we stop trying and just become comfortable with the whatever you want to make your new normal is kind of what like hinders people. And so like the stories of what you go through, what I go through, we're all different. And learning from those stories, and for me, what I go through and how I deal with something is going to be totally different than you and you. Even though we're all three Christian men, we're all going to deal with something different. Yeah. And I think that's something in today's world, especially, like we all just need to remember. It's like you got to just keep moving, got to keep trying, got to keep going, and just learn and live through it.
Well, and I think one of the things that a lot of men fail in is this idea of community and like needing that the relationship with other men who are like-minded.
Oh yeah.
Right?
100%.
I mean, how many of our friends like don't have real authentic friendships or true conversations about their failures in life?
Or think you need it.
Right?
Because we're macho.
Yeah.
Or because you're a man.
Yeah.
You don't
want to
feelings.
ask for help.
I was one of those for a long time. I'm still learning.
Yeah, me too.
I'm still learning that. Don't get me wrong.
Me too.
But
sure.
yeah, I've learned, especially in marriage and as a father, like you have to have those relationships that you can like actually have raw conversations about and being honest with, and the accountability and the, just understanding people that are in the same season of you and being able to speak wisdom into your life. Because that's God made people for relationship. That's clear. We all know that.
Yeah.
But as men, I think we tend to shy away from it. Like we just don't like that true conversation, those true raw conversations.
Well, because it's hard.
Yeah, vulnerability is hard.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to be.
On.
I mean, we all have, maybe a sense of pride. I might have a little bit of that.
I got a big chip on my shoulder
If you
sometimes.
ask my wife, I might have more than a little bit. But but I've learned that it's really key to success.
I've heard, like, going back to what you mentioned before, where you might fall out or maybe go away from your faith for a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard that a lot in the church as kids are growing up and people that grew up in the church. But what do you think of parents being involved? Like, how much were your parents involved while you're going through that? Because I'm a firm believer that sometimes you have to let your kids fall and get a boo-boo.
Yep.
So they can feel that
Yeah.
the concrete is hard and it's going to hurt your knee and you probably shouldn't run.
Yeah.
Especially if you're wet and you're at the pool. But and then other times you're like, you want to be there to catch them and protect them
Sure.
and to shelter them, but you can't sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially with things changing and technology changing and social media. Like, I don't know if we talked about it, but I was looking at some of the stats, and for over the last 10 years, like, suicide rate is up, depression is up, anxiety's up. And I'm talking up, like skyrocketing
Scary
for
up.
kids between like 12 and 18
Yeah.
because they're living in this like fantasy world. Like, my son is a freshman in high school, bless you,
Excuse me.
and he doesn't have Snapchat, or he did, and he got reprimanded for that. But he's not allowed to have Snapchat. He's not allowed to have Instagram.
Yeah.
I don't want him thinking that like this is the real world.
Yeah.
I think the environment, as a dad now, I have a 12-year-old, my oldest. It is extremely scary to think about them in today's world. I think Ben and I had a very similar upbringing with the way our parents raised us, which was almost, I wouldn't say hands off, but they were pretty trusting, maybe more than they should have been at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been a struggle, to be honest with you, for me to have that same just hands-off approach. I like to have much more control.
I feel like things were different too back then.
Yeah, I think that the environment's so
not to have
different.
that double standard, but we were guys. Like, I don't know how I'd be
Right.
when my daughter's,
Yeah.
my age or
Oh,
our
yeah.
age during that.
No.
Some boy looks at her. I'm
Yeah.
like, what are you doing?
I'm gonna come over.
The honest truth, I think the success, it goes back to the very first thing we talked about for us. The success of the way my parents raised me was this idea of community. And so it wasn't my parents raising me alone. It was my parents and their friends and these people who had invested in us. My youth leaders, my youth pastors. My parents kept me in the church. That was one thing that was not on the table. Like, we were going to be at church on Wednesday night. We were there on Sunday mornings. We were there on Sunday nights.
You're helping set up. You're
Right. And even in the I would say even in the season that I was not as faithful as I should have been, and I was making mistakes, I was still at church, right or wrong. Some may say it was wrong, but I was still there every week, and because that had
been instilled in you.
that instilled in me. It was a piece of who I was. It was just not more than a habit. It was more of just who I was. So that is, I was talking to some friends about this last week. It's one of the things that scares me the most with where we are today. The church was already in peril before COVID.
Yeah.
Right. The idea of the importance of going to church, of raising your family in church, was already at risk. And now we're 6 months, 9 months into COVID. We're talking about churches not reopening. Dozens and dozens and dozens of churches are never going to open their doors again.
Yeah.
And this idea of the attack on the family is real. And I honestly think if you think about the real effects of COVID, it's broken marriages, it's families who will never go back to church. It's a whole generation of people, of Christians, people call themselves Christians, who will never grow that muscle of going back to church.
Yeah.
And these kids who will not be raised in the church. Now, I'm not saying the church is the answer to everything. And there's plenty of kids that we went to high school or youth group with that maybe fell their faith. But I think it's a really key piece of building strong community, of friendships that eventually, like I said, Ben and I we could sit here for hours talking about all the mistakes we made in our life. But at the end of the day, we're sitting here together. We're both Christian fathers who are raising our children to know the Lord. And so I think that's a really big piece of the reason I am here. And I think it's a really scary piece as we think about raising our kids today, because I think the environment, the expectations, the idea of church, it's just not the same. And this is really going to perpetuate the problem of, again, I keep saying community, but it's so important to me, like relationships. It's what we're made for.
Well, I think it means a lot.
Yeah.
Like I would open up when I was younger. I felt more comfortable opening up to my buddies' parents than I did to my own. Even girls that I liked or mistakes I made, I'd open up to them a little bit more because they were there. Not that my parents didn't listen, but they were there, and then they'd give me advice. So I 100% agree. I think community is extremely important, and it's something that we definitely need to rely on.
Yep.
And so do you have anything else for this young man?
Honestly, just thank you for letting us interview you, especially as our first one doing it together.
Man.
It was awesome.
Is there, where can people find you on social media? How can they find Meguiar's or yourself, and just go ahead and plug away?
Yeah, no, I'll plug for Meguiar's. Meguiar's is easy to find, meguiars.com. Social channels, it's all Meguiar's. Instagram, Facebook. For me, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Tony D'Amato. D''A.
Ooh, apostrophe, fancy.
It's fancy.
D'Amato. But no, and I'm sure you can link it on the bio.
Yeah, we'll link it on the bio and give you guys a shout out and do everything. But
it's been
man, appreciate you coming on. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely,
Ben. It was awesome for the first time. So appreciate you guys. Can't wait for you guys to see this. And that's it for us. So remember that everything was impossible until someone did it. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Kingdom Nutrition. Make sure you guys go and visit their site over at kingdomnutrition.com and enter promo code MFW10 to get 10% off your next purchase. Kingdom Nutrition carries the best sports supplements on the market. They manufacture and curate their own line of supplements with the highest quality ingredients, including a lean protein, weight gainer protein, pre-workout, BCAAs, and an array of other products. They've recently created the world's first vegan chickpea protein, and it tastes amazing. I'm a big dude. I like food, and I like chocolate. So when they told me it comes in chocolate and vanilla, I got really happy. But if you're a workout enthusiast and you want to change up your diet, change up your protein, go check out their vanilla chickpea protein. It mixes well with anything. It'll blend great with a smoothie. So to get your hands on any of these products, just make sure and go visit kingdomnutrition.com. Remember to enter promo code MFW10 and get 10% off your next purchase. Let's go.